preservation of and increased access to the 92nd Street Y Humanities Audio Archives is generously funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Good evening. I'm Daniel Stern, Director of the Humanities here at the Y. I'd like to welcome you to the first of 4 evenings devoted to the art of architecture, which we call The Shape of the City. Before I make a perhaps entirely unnecessary but brief introduction of our moderator, Paul Goldberger, let me tell you that following tonight's slide presentation, Mr. Goldberger will discuss specifics and philosophy of architecture with tonight's guest, Mr. Bernardo Fort-Brescia. And during the discussion, you may wish to think of some questions and formulate them, and afterwards, the floor will be open for that purpose. Paul Goldberger, to whom we are grateful for making this series such an extraordinary success for the past 5 years now, has been architecture critic of the New York Times since 1973. In 1984, he won the Pulitzer Prize for Distinguished Journalism. I believe that's the highest award there is in that field, in recognition of his writings on architecture in the Times. Mr. Goldberger studied at Yale under Vincent Scully. He joined the Times in 1972 and in 1981 became the paper's senior architecture critic. In 1981, he was also awarded the Medal of the American Institute of Architects for his criticism, and he has been presented with the President's Medal of the Municipal Art Society of New York in 1984. Paul is the author of The City Observed, New York, An Architect's Guide to Manhattan, and a number of other books. And we are honored tonight to have Paul introduce Mr. Fort-Brescia of Arquitectonica in Florida, and Paul will tell you more about that. And welcome to the beginning of the series, and here is Paul Goldberger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to welcome all of you, those of you who have been here over the past several years, and newcomers to this series. The title, for those of you who have not been with us, The Shape of the City, is meant to sort of start us off and not to limit us. It goes back to the very first year this series existed, when the guests each evening were all architects who were in the middle or in process with some major New York City project. We've since gone on to certainly wider, if not necessarily greater horizons. And the title has remained with us, but in no way do we limit ourselves to cities, to shapes, or to anything else except what we hope will be a lively and interesting conversation on architecture. Future evenings include Moshe Safdie this year, architect of the first and now put aside project for Columbus Circle, as well as the new National Gallery in Ottawa, Canada. John Portman, the celebrated architect of Atrium Hotels. James Stewart Polshek, the architect who has been responsible for the restoration of Carnegie Hall, among other projects, and a very active architect of cultural facilities in New York. And continuing some issues that I hope will be part of our discussion tonight on the work of younger architects and the particular questions and problems and issues that are on the minds of younger architects. Ben Benedict and Carl Pucci of the New York firm of Bumpzoid will be with us for the final evening. Bernardo Fort-Brescia, our guest tonight, is one of two principals of Arquitectonica, a Miami-based architectural firm, in which the other principal is his wife, Laurinda Spear. This is not, however, a mom-and-pop operation. For a relatively young firm, it was founded in 1977. There's the extraordinary number of 70 members of the staff, divided between a head office in Miami, offices in San Francisco, Chicago, and even New York, that provincial town. Arquitectonica has perhaps the most remarkable track record in terms of quantity of building of any young, serious firm in America. They were founded, as I said, in 1977, when the principals were still in their 20s. very quickly received a commission to design a high-rise condominium in Miami, a building that has become celebrated as one of the things you see in the opening credits of Miami Vice. And then from there went on to a very wide-ranging oeuvre of work. The only real common thread being, as Bernardo Fort-Brescia said, we have been modernists from the beginning to now. We have never really let down the flag. We'll begin the evening, as we usually do, with a very brief review of slides. Bernardo will simply identify a bunch of images, then the lights will come back up, and we'll take our seats and talk both about the pictures we've seen and any other issues that seem to come across the table. Afterwards, we will open the floor to questions. We're going to try an experiment this year. The Y tradition in past years, as those of you who've been here before know, has been to have questions written down and submitted in writing. We're going to be very daring this year and just open the floor and see what comes. But the timetable will be as in past evenings. We'll keep the slides to just a few minutes at the beginning and give you a kind of memory bank of visual images. Then probably about 40 minutes of conversation, and then another while of questions. So let me introduce Bernardo Fort-Brescia of Arquitectonica, first for some slides and then for some conversation. Thank you. Bernardo? Thank you. Thank you.
I was asked to give you a very quick overview of our work from beginning to now, and I picked about 7 projects and a couple slides of each, and you can, hopefully they speak for themselves, and I'll just identify what they are. Why don't we get started? Back in 1977, this was the first project we did, the Pink House in Miami Shores, in a suburb north of Miami. This is the interior view of the inner court inside the house. Soon after, a couple of years later, we started designing this building, which was completed in 1982, high-rise condominium in downtown Miami. And this is a view of a piece of the building, as you can see right through it, and where there's a pool and a palm tree and other things happening. Recently, we completed a new North Dade County Courthouse in north of Miami as well, which was our first government building, with the use of maybe more durable materials than some of these more buildings that did for developers in our early practice. This is a view from the entrance from the inner court. Nearing completion right now, across from Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C., is the new Center for Innovative Technology, a big research facility and computer analysis facility. The vertical tower that you see there is the research lab. This is a new swimming hall of fame and Olympic swimming pool competition complex in Fort Lauderdale. That runs all the way from the Intracoastal Waterway into the beach on the other side through this park. This is still on the local side. This is a shopping complex in downtown Atlanta. And this is the view inside the space. The geodesic dome that you see there is to be covered with kudzu, plant that actually will be a giant kudzu ball that is rolling down the hill into the water. And the little dots were some. This is the corporate headquarters of Banco de Crédito in Lima, Peru, that we just completed, 530,000 square foot building. Here's a view of the entrance, the security entrance, and the atrium. And these are some of the views through the court into the Andes. And this is just a fire escape. and this is a view from the corner with the blue stripes of glass on the black marble. And I show this just to show you our ideas about New York. This was our submittal for Jack Parker, a local developer for the South Ferry Plaza competition at the point of Manhattan. for a Meridian Hotel at the base and office building on top, and that new terminal on the side. That's about it. Maybe we can talk now. Thank you.
If you gentlemen could just clear the stage.
Okay, thank you. He has declined an invitation to play the piano tonight, so we have... Let me start sort of at almost the beginning and ask you if you can say a word about the Florida I guess it's the Atlantis, right? It's the building with the hole in it that has become almost iconographic in its power, partly due to your own architecture, partly due to the identification of it through television. But I think the power of that building does not come solely through television. There's a reason that it was chosen as a kind of icon to be shown in that television show all the time, which is that it appears to express some sense of what we believe or want that city to be, kind of super sleekness and a kind of razzle-dazzle quality to it. And given how most contemporary architecture, at least since Morris Lapidus in Miami, has been very dull. Can you tell us something about how you came to this design, what you were trying to do, and so forth?
Yeah, actually, that project was our second exercise in what we define as being contextual.
Right.
There's many ways of being contextual. Some architects feel that to be contextual, you simulate the buildings next to you, align the cornices, and match the architectural style of the era that surrounds the building. And we chose differently. Neither Laurinda and I were educated in architecture in Florida. We just arrived there. And
Laurinda is from there, right?
She was born there. She grew up there. Sorry,
okay,
but
right.
hadn't been there for a long time.
Right.
And we came and looked at the whole place and what had happened historically. And yes, there had been the Mediterranean buildings of the 1920s and Art Deco of the 30s. And prior to that, there were these the original cracker houses that were sort of borrowed from Cape Cod and New England. And then there was the Morris Lapidus. And we were trying to, and we thought of how to be of being contextual more than imitating what had been done before, to try to capture the spirit of the place. How could we capture that intangible and do still something new, that you're really actually turning a page in history into something that represents then the 80s, yet it was still something that the public could identify with as being Floridian. And that was I can't describe how to do it because there's no formula. We just sat there and started drawing and thinking, what is the exuberance of Florida?
Right.
And how do you capture it in a building that looks different, yet people think, boy, it really is Florida. And I just can't describe more than that. It was, that's what we were trying to do. It also, however, did address some of the problems of the suburban city and of the high-rise, in the sense that it juxtaposed very minuscule details with very monumental pieces, like the giant opening through the building or the three-story blue grid on the other side of the building, was trying to address clarity to the viewer from far away, not only from close up. And a lot of buildings, particularly in cities on the waterfront, are seen from the causeway, from the expressway, from across the bay. And we thought there's a lot of these condominiums with the little tiny balconies with picket rails, but which maybe you come up closely and maybe you can appreciate the railing. But in addition to that, how do we speak long distance, and how do we communicate that to the person that is just not living there, but is just the public out there?
It's interesting because you speak of yourself as a modernist, which indeed you are, and yet when you talk about it in those terms, my first association is with some of Venturi's writing of years ago, and talking about seeing a city from 60 miles an hour, and signage, and instant, rapid imagery, as opposed to the very subtle imagery of a Baroque city or something like that, or Renaissance.
I think
signage.
We consider, I really admire Venturi's work, by the way, and his writings. And we were definitely seeing ourselves as an American phenomenon. I mean, we were never trying to make America like Europe or anything like that. I mean, we thought there are qualities that America has that can be exploited and are good, and how can they contribute positively to the American landscape instead of being embarrassed about it.
As remarkable as the design of that particular job, it seems to me, it's just the fact that you got that job at all. If we go back to Frank Lloyd Wright, who's forever being quoted as saying the first principle of architecture was get the job. You did so when you were in your 20s, got a job that in scale and scope is the sort that normally goes to older, more established, more corporate firms. How did that happen?
Well,
Harry Helmsley was the developer, was he not?
No.
No, he was not. He was of another one.
Another building.
Oh, right, okay.
But yes, actually, prior to this building.
That's right. Okay. Well, then how did that one happen? How did they both happen?
Well, he essentially had a competition. I mean, we won the design competition, that's all. I mean, tough thing was to get invited to the competition. But,
what led,
but once you get invited, you compete, then
if I can ask you to even go back one step further, what led Helmsley to hold a competition at all? It certainly was not the style that he pursued at the Helmsley Palace Hotel, for example, or the Harley Hotel, or some of the things that he's graced this city with. What?
Well, going to Miami, he actually felt he needed something new. He thought the city was a changing city that was becoming very cosmopolitan and international, and that he thought that to, I'm sure it was just a marketing decision, in other words. It was, and that it needed something new, and he invited people to 7 firms, I think, to a limited competition, and we were one of them. We were already doing a smaller building, just a block away, and so we knew the area, and I'm sure he had nothing to lose by inviting us and seeing what we could come up with. And when we presented our design, he liked it best of all, and just hired us. So it was that simple. You know?
And that was really the beginning of your status as a major firm, I guess.
Well, locally.
Locally.
Yes.
Okay.
Soon after, we were doing other projects. Yes, other large projects. Just in that block alone, we do 3 big high-rises.
Right.
But getting the work is, yes, I think it's an important part. And I think the important think that we were almost paranoid about being categorized as being only concerned with design. And particularly if you're trying to experiment and trying to do anything out of the ordinary, you have to be extremely cautious that the building is on budget and efficient and simple to build, and that the details are standard details, and all, so that and that everything works from the economic feasibility side, so that you're not, so that one of these things are not used as the excuse for rejecting an interesting design, because often people are afraid of arguing against what is really subjective, which is the appearance of the building, and therefore, but they will quickly pick on that objective thing, such as it's horribly inefficient, or it doesn't work, or it's not functional, and use that as the excuse to reject an interesting design. We would never permit that. I mean, we were really careful that every other aspect of the building worked really well.
So really, in terms of net to gross ratio, in terms of floor plan efficiency, all those things.
Oh yeah, we wouldn't be caught doing something out of that was not, and we double checked everything to make sure. So that was part of the key of the early success of the firm.
Is that in many ways the work is really more conventional underneath than it might appear to be.
Oh, even the floor plans are unusual, but they're they work. I mean, they're functional. The bathroom is in the right place. You can use it normally. Without, I mean, you don't have to cross the living room to go to the bathroom. I mean, there are certain basic rules.
You have kitchens.
Yeah,
you have
the closets.
Like that.
Yeah. Well, it is, and also, I mean, and efficiency ratios. And there are other issues that developers really get worried when they are violated, and we don't violate those rules.
Good. The buildings in Miami, the early ones, have been criticized, though, for being, by people who have often praised the design, but for not being executed, perhaps with the finesse that the design itself calls for, is perhaps the most diplomatic way in which I've heard that criticism phrased. That the design is unusual and sophisticated, but the buildings, when you sort of get underneath them, have many of the same sort of cut corners, not literally, but in terms of construction quality, of a typical developer-built condominium. Is that a fair criticism?
To some extent, yes. But I have to say that there's a reason for it. I mean, there's a certain budget to make these buildings work.
Right.
And since the beginning, and very early on, our firm took on the task of trying to get to those building types that often design architects wouldn't touch, because the budget wasn't fancy and it was difficult to deal with developers. And those kind of buildings represent like 95% or more of the amount of construction that happens in the United States. And we intentionally took somewhat populist position of going after, strip centers, strip shopping centers and condominiums and spec office buildings and the kind of building types that are going to happen, and that they have limited budgets, and there's still an opportunity to do architecture. Yes, they are not going to have the fancy, marble threshold or whatever, because there isn't the money, and whether we design them or anybody else, they won't happen. But I think it was, we have some now projects with nice budgets, but. And we still, however, continue to do those developer projects because we think it's almost now particularly that government-sponsored low-income work is not around. I think the architect has an obligation to impact society also at the level of those low-budget buildings, and we maintain that we will continue to do those kind of buildings.
Wait, was your per square foot cost competitive in that building with?
All my neighbors.
The ordinary stuff done next door?
Absolutely, exactly the same.
Exactly the same. Well, if it's exactly the same, didn't it cost a little more to do the whole and do some of the other things? And if so, does that come out of something else? In other words,
No.
my worry is that to produce that building for exactly the same cost, is it possible that $1 or $2 actually comes out of the units inside to go into some of the
No, the units have to
great
be
gestures?
The units have to be comparable to the rest of the market. These are the things you can't compromise, because otherwise the developer will tell you that take away the whole. So you have to, so you just can't let that happen. I mean, the whole happened only because it was happening without any sacrifice.
Okay.
And if you look, if you start thinking about where the whole happens, it happens only 4 floors away from the top.
Right.
So there's almost no load being transferred.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, the higher it is, the cheaper it is, because there's less load to carry over it.
Sure.
And the more dramatic it is, higher up.
Of course.
And
to do it at the bottom has no point.
yeah, and it is. It is so. But it's more. It's in fact not that kind of expense. It didn't cost any FAR. All that square footage was put on the top floor and added more valuable apartments, since they increase in price as they go up. So we had to figure out an explanation. We designed first what we thought was going to be interesting, and we had to figure out how to explain it in developer terms. But there is an explanation in developer terms, always.
I have a feeling we've now come to the key of your success. Actually, it took us 10 minutes. We've got it. We've got there. Okay.
You asked the question.
No, and you've answered it brilliantly. I think it's exactly right. And in fact, I think the whole point is that you have been able to find a point of intersection between developer concerns and more serious architectural issues, which is a point of intersection that some have disdained and chosen not to seek at all. Others have sought it and failed to find it. I think you have been both willing to find it and have succeeded in finding it. Or perhaps establishing it on your own terms and your own turf is perhaps a better way to put it. Before we move on geographically, what's actually happening in Miami at this point? I mean, there was a sense of, in the first years of your work, and also a greater boom in that area, of a lot of excitement there. One doesn't hear very much about Miami at this point.
Architecture goes together with the economy of the place.
Sure.
And yes, there was a moment of a boom, and then there was a slowdown, and now there's once more a very strong recovery, and there's a lot of new projects. But there was a quiet moment in both architecture and construction. And so there was a gap in there. But the gap has ended. I mean, there's quite a few new projects.
But you are now busier, you say, on the West Coast.
Well, equally busy in California and
Right.
Florida, yes.
Right.
California, we have a fairly large amount of work, but now in Miami also quite a bit.
What sort of stuff are you doing in California?
We're doing the new Bank of America building in Los Angeles,
Oh,
a whole city block.
downtown?
In Beverly Hills, on Wilshire Boulevard.
Right.
We're doing also a condominium in Beverly Hills, a 22-story building. We're doing in San Francisco a very large, like a small city on the bay, about 2,000 apartments on 34 acres on San Francisco Bay. We're doing the new Convention Center Hotel in San Jose in Silicon Valley. We're doing a winery in Sonoma, and a house in Beverly Hills. I mean, it's
A lot of work.
Oh yeah, I mean a lot. There's a few other things. Yes, we have. You don't want to hear.
No, we do. How does it, to the extent that one can make stylistic generalizations or leaps, how is it comparable to the Miami work?
I think it has a certain spirit of investigation, but it doesn't look like it at all. No, I mean there's no resemblance as far as any kind of regional characteristic. It doesn't look like Florida now. But it's hard to describe. It is not a historical style that I can pick out of an encyclopedia, you know. So
Sure,
I can't tell you it's mission style, you know. It is not, as a matter of fact. But it is. Once more, there's that intangible, but I feel it's very much what. I think it feels very California, but it's definitely new and different. I mean, San Francisco thinks so. You know, a lot of public hearings, you know.
San Francisco is likely to think that anything that isn't Victorian is somewhat dangerously
Yes.
radical. So that
Yeah.
on the other hand, Los Angeles is a city that is not unlike Miami in some ways. I mean, it certainly
Yes.
is. It's a tropical city. It's a city with a heavy Hispanic population. It's a city that grew large in the 20th century. It's a city on the water. I mean, they are not without some similarities. So one would think, in fact, that, and indeed it's no accident that in the 20s, there was a significant amount of Spanish mission stuff done in both places. I mean, that's a sort of a,
Yes.
within the architectural heritage, such as it is, of both cities. So in fact, in some ways it might argue that a logical response would be similar, actually, not different. I mean, that the colors and the sort of crisp geometric forms of your work might, in fact, find a logical counterpart in Los Angeles. I mean, some of your work looks almost like morphosis with color in it, which we think of now as very, very Southern California.
Well, there's some difference, however, because there isn't really an open bay in the city right up against the water.
Right.
And even when you reach the water in Los Angeles, you just look out onto it, but you never look back to the city like you do in Miami from all the islands in front of the city, which are all populated. And but yes, it is flat and it is warm, and there's a very similar use of materials. You know, stucco and is a common material there. It's not a red brick city. Neither is Miami.
Right.
And, so there are great similarities. Yes, and there is also that sense of the theatrical about architecture.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's the greatest similarity of all.
And I think that's where it really comes together. Yes.
What do you do when you actually go to a red brick city? Let me use your phrase there. Maybe we can talk about some of the work you've done in New York. The design you showed us that was not built for South Ferry strikes me as it's actually very exciting. It's a great deal more exciting than what was selected for that competition and happily not yet built. But it does not strike me, wonderful as it is and visually powerful, it did not strike me as necessarily characteristic of New York or that different from the work you showed us before.
Well, that's a matter of opinion, of course. You know? I don't see New York as a red brick city.
Okay. Limestone city? Or
I don't think I see New York as any specific material city. It is. I see New York, if anything, as the epitome of the American city with architectural pluralism. You know, there's just about every block has a different kind of architecture.
Right.
At least in the more developed areas, there are granite buildings, glass buildings. I mean, this is a city where there's the Lever House and the Seagram building, and just down the street is the Helmsley building and the Waldorf Astoria and all this. I mean, it's all. I don't think. I think the excitement of New York is precisely that diversity, and that as time went by, there were always periods inserted into the history of New York where people dared to push to a next step. I mean, the Rockefeller Center was a bold move away from the more historical building along Fifth Avenue, like let's say Saks or whatever, there's others, or the Plaza, and move on to a more streamlined approach. And so they did the Empire State Building, and they left their mark, and then came. If one jumps a little bit, you go into the Lever House, and there's long periods of repetition, and then there's these short periods of some there. And I don't think New York is by any means a uniform city of any specific style. This is definitely, if anything, the city of architectural variety, and that's what makes it great. So I didn't see our design as being un-New York in that sense, because I find it difficult to establish what is.
Okay. How would you characterize your design, since you didn't have a chance to really describe it when the image was on the screen? Can you tell us a little more about it now?
Once more, I immediately related to the context and where it happened in relation to the city. This was not an infill project.
Right.
It was not a project that was abutting and aligning on the other buildings. It was not part of the city grid. It was not. It was this. This is where the grid suddenly disintegrates and sort of gets scattered as it reaches the point, and it becomes very medieval, and
right.
It is and. Further than that, this was the site that completed the point, and looking around at the buildings that make the symbol of the Wall Street neighborhood, in spite of the criticism, the one building that carries any architectural strength is the World Trade Center, and as a matter of fact, it's the only building in that end of town that is in a postcard if you look at any stand in Manhattan.
Right.
And it is, and I thought, and that building, by the way, had really no relationship to anything else, and yet it had a successful presence on the skyline, on the ground. Maybe there's other issues, but at least on the skyline. And I thought that the point needed something that would stand on its own. And we went as far as separating the building from the city. We thought it was inappropriate to put it right up at the edge of the site and try to join in with the rest of the cluster of buildings. And we made an island off the island. I mean, we tried to, and we began it as rock, as if it was rising from the rock.
Like Mont Saint-Michel.
Yes, and then exactly.
Right.
Yes, a modern Mont Saint-Michel, and then linked it with this connector, this piece that came back to the city, and then the rock became glass and it created a trunk, and then we wrapped a robe around it in the black color that you saw, that took on almost a very amorphous shape and non-architectural shape. Among other things that we try to do is essentially the robe leave the building incomplete and not have really a ornate and complex top, but instead symbolize our times of communications and just shoot upward whatever came out of the systems of the building past that robe. I mean, robe, I don't mean the Statue of Liberty or any reference specifically, but just that.
It's a very arresting image. Did it also, if I may ask, meet your criteria of being, of answering all the developers' questions, of being economical
yes, absolutely.
and all that? It was.
No question. Yes.
Okay.
We did.
Yeah. Do you think it was not chosen then simply because the city was afraid of it, or what?
No, frankly, it was rather disturbing because
Yeah.
I heard about the ratings of the design and all that,
Right,
and it was
right.
we were doing pretty well. But it is really disturbing that there's a mixture of, in the ratings, of design and the economic proposal and the return to the city and the lease
Yes.
and so forth.
Yes, yes,
It
yes.
is, and that in fact our clients' numbers were like second after the other number, and and the other number was better, and like in the end they choose it on dollars. And on dollars that are difficult to measure. For example, our client was proposing a hotel and office on top, and therefore less square footage of office, and about a third of it being hotel. Of course, hotel can pay less land lease, but it gives more jobs to the city. So it's a difficult measurement, and obviously the number in the lease was more important than the number of jobs. And that's what I understand, by the way, and maybe I need to be corrected if this is the explanation I heard, but it wasn't really a design competition. That was
it was not a design competition.
That was the strange thing, because they had all these forums at the Urban Institute, I don't remember the name, and they had all these Urban Center, and they had all these presentations about the architecture, and then I find out that it was really irrelevant.
Well, it was not irrelevant.
No, but
I think it was not the deciding factor.
Yeah.
I think the city was attempting to make design one of the criteria and respond somewhat to the criticism that had been made of the immediate past preceding city competition, which was Columbus Circle and the Coliseum, where design was an essentially irrelevant part of the process, and it was only how much money the city would make. Here they were attempting to satisfy those who had charged the city with rejecting design altogether, but in fact had not really changed their own priorities significantly. So I think that was there was a great deal of high-sounding talk about design now becoming one of the factors, but it remained a relatively modest one, as I could see it. I don't know if we should let you escape with the comment about the World Trade Center unchallenged. It is surely the most arresting and powerful image downtown, but is that not a result of simply of its scale, of simply being so much bigger than anything else that it is bound to control any image we have?
I could never deny that. I mean, of course, the size has something to do with it. Yes, a lot of it has to do also with that. The strength has to do with the monolithic nature, that you can't recognize the windows from far away.
Right.
It's almost like the Washington Monument, you know, and that it looks like this solid blocks, and the fact that there are two.
And the fact that there are two is very important.
Yeah, which I actually like, the fact that there are two. I mean, the fact that there's no tallest, you know, it like sort of destroys that, you know, that there are two of these things, you know, and it's sort of disturbing, you know, and the tension of those two huge things. I mean, I think there's, well, you know, I like things that make you react.
Well, there is I mean, they do have a certain power as minimalist sculpture, the two objects playing off against each other. Yeah. But if there were only one, it would be, that power would be gone. I mean, it
completely.
Would be
the fact that there are two is what does it, I think.
Yeah.
I wish he had chamfered the corners, but okay.
But he had chamfered the corner, or hadn't.
He did.
He did,
They're slightly, you know, I mean,
very slightly, though. You only notice it when you're relatively close up. You don't see it from a distance, the chamfer.
Yeah, but it all counts. I mean, it's sort of weakening a little bit, the
well,
purity,
the little Gothic arches weaken it.
Oh, yeah, that's
more,
totally. That's what I was referring to, the ground plane. I thought, I mean, that's definitely, no, it doesn't approve. That doesn't mean my approval, but I was talking more about long distance image.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me more about your thought of a moment ago, that you like things that shake us up or that change our. Can you speak to that in terms of both your own work and other work that you like? I mean, is shock value necessarily? Well, let me let you
I didn't say shock
value.
value.
Let me let you think about that for a moment with another related question first. Is it possible that in the last few years we have gone too far in the other direction, that sort of the whole idea of context and of architectural good manners and of fitting in, which perhaps were ignored a generation ago, have now become almost too important, and that we have tended not to be sufficiently cognizant of the value of sort of a startling image that breaks from its surroundings?
Yeah, yes, that is possible, but I don't think one has to go to the
Okay.
to extreme of shock. I mean, what I meant by my previous remark was more that a building should generate an emotion in the viewer. That's what architecture is. Otherwise, it's just a building. I mean, to me, architecture has to have more than just provide the shelter and it's adequate and fine. I mean, it has to have, it communicates something and somehow generate some reaction, emotional reaction in the viewer. Mm-hmm. And that reaction should not be necessarily shock. I mean,
Right.
that's, unless it's a horror house, you know. But it's that reaction, that emotion depends on the building type.
Right.
And if you're doing a resort, it should communicate fun, and if it's church, should make you feel like meditating, and if it's and there are certain buildings that may want to communicate, in fact, power, and every building carries some kind of a symbol of its use, should carry the symbol of its use somewhere and communicate the appropriateness of that architecture for that use. And for that, it has to somehow generate some emotion. And that's what I meant by, I do think that building does something, at least. Many others don't.
Let's look at two of your buildings that you showed us tonight and think about them in those terms, if we could. The Dade County Courthouse and that high-tech center for high technology outside of Washington near Dulles Airport, which are both fairly strong visual images, which they have in common with the rest of your work. Can you say something specifically about how the Dade County Courthouse might suggest power or authority or whatever you were trying to do there?
No, I didn't think justice was an issue of power.
Okay.
It was.
How does it communicate justice
And
then?
therefore,
Or does it,
I thought it was more an issue of fairness.
Okay.
And if anything, to destroy the feeling that you're arriving to some awesome building of, that appeared too powerful, if anything, and possibly abusive. Sure. And I was trying to loosen up the whole idea of justice and make you feel comfortable and at ease that you're arriving to a place that you can feel comfortable, that is soft and different and relaxed. And the building forms are not even, there's no great symmetry or grand stairs. You sort of enter through a breezeway from either side, whether you come from the parking area or from the bus stop. And we intentionally introduced natural light through skylights into the courtrooms, and that made them totally enclosed. You couldn't put windows because then it's distracting, but at least let's bring in the natural light and try to make it easy for people to handle the affairs within. Mm-hmm. Including, like, we have a drive-up teller to pay the tickets, I mean, things that are, that are typical of suburbia that almost you start feeling that
it's a user-friendly courthouse.
Well, why not? Yes. It's with regard to the Center for Innovative Technology, it is a research building, and it is for the state of Virginia, and it's a complex that is intended to promote technology in the state. And we were looking for a building that communicated that, even though it was Virginia, where there's a fairly traditional place. Although Dulles Airport is right across the street, so it's no undaring location. And we thought of one of the important things about the building was that it was by no means felt static, that it had movement, and that almost was defying gravity and floating and not anchored on the ground. And after all, a lot of the progress in technology in this century has come from man's obsession with speed and movement and travel and defying gravity and flying and going up to space and so forth. And there are two buildings. There's the software productivity building where there's all this research stuff that is just a plain rectangle that is tilted to look like a parallelogram that is shooting off the platform where the building sits horizontally. And there's a second building, the administration building, which is in fact rising up towards the sky and just sort of cut off against the sky. And it actually grows in size as it reaches up vertically. And the glass pattern emphasizes all this, and there's other things in the building that...
And that is now near completion, you say?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it's very near. It's very evident from the road, yes.
Yeah. I mean, they both seem to be very handsome, but also convincing buildings symbolically. But, and I don't mean this to be critical, but I was struck as you were talking about the fact that had you said that the Center for Innovative Court Technology was the courthouse, and the courthouse was the Center for Innovative Technology, I think it is possible that one could also construct a very convincing rationale for the fact that the symbolism of each was the other.
Well, I wouldn't mind.
You wouldn't mind? Okay.
No.
I mean, I think this is...
It's up to interpretation, you know. I mean, I don't, it is, you know, really, frankly, I very seldom speak about our work. I think architecture should speak for itself. There's never architects who have all these incredible complex and historical explanations about their work. I don't think are planning to spend the rest of their lives in the lobby of the building, making sure that everybody understands. You know, I mean, it's you know, some villa somewhere in Umbria. You know, I mean, it was a source. You know, I mean, it's. And then once you hear the explanation, you say, "So what? I'm in America." You know, I mean, but I think buildings should speak for themselves. And yes, we have our own explanations for ourselves and our own justifications, but they're really, frankly, irrelevant. If the public feels right about the building, that's what counts. And most of our work, that's how people feel, and that's what we like about our work. That's all that counts, you know. It's the rest is for our own personal satisfaction, and that's about it, you know.
Well, you shouldn't backpedal so fast, because I mean, I think the rationales you gave were very strong ones.
Yeah,
and I don't
for my own consumption. You know?
I love the idea, though, of sort of the architect standing in the lobby handing out like sort of Cliff's notes about his building or something.
Yeah, you know?
It's a great idea.
I have to tell you that I don't always explain all this to the client. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I explain to the client down the line some of these ideas. I really first try to make sure the client feels comfortable with what he sees, irrespective of the explanation.
So you find your clients actually tend to respond more by intuitive sense of a design. I mean, it just looks right to them more than a
I think most clients either feel right about the building or they don't feel right, and I think no explanation will change their minds. Frankly, it is it's just that they like it. Or, I mean, it feels that it's the right kind of building, or it doesn't feel like it's the right kind of building, and the rest is a bonus. You know, it's just if there's a good rationale.
No, I think that's very true of all kinds of architecture beyond yours. That ultimately there's a sort of a sense of rightness to it when it works, and and all the theorizing in the world will not create that sense if it doesn't. And
frankly, we put a lot of weight in our practice and in our design decisions in the office on intuition. I mean, there is that rational side that I've explained, and we cover the rational side, but then comes that intuitive side. I mean, that feeling that the space will be right, that it'll have the right proportions, and there's no formula for the measurement. I mean, you just have to, and that's what we architects are trained, supposedly, to do, to put it in a drawing, and when it becomes reality is what we thought was going to feel like. And that's, and I think that's the most romantic and side of our profession, and I think that's what makes a building good. There's that human side that of architecture, which is simply the feeling of the architect, that makes a building human. You know, that there may be some margin of error in it, but that is what makes it human.
Great, good. That's a good moment, I think, to turn to all of you and continue with some questions. Tonight, as I said, we are running cold without anything written down in advance, so I will try to see beyond these lights and call on anyone with a question. If you can raise your hand and stand up, please, so that we see you. Yes, sir.
Yes, you are operating 3 major offices spread across the country. How do you exercise design control on all of these projects so that the product, let's say, comes out being a product that's distinctive to your office?
Why don't you summarize the question in case people didn't hear it, okay?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Or I can if you
Sure,
like.
go ahead.
Okay, I will, just in case anyone didn't hear it. The gist of the question was you are running 3 different design offices around the country. How do you exercise design control to be sure that the product is something you are happy with?
Well, the fact is that all our projects are designed in the main office in Miami. The other offices are primarily for the construction documents, the working drawings, and the supervision of the construction. It is, we have, there really are 2 designers in our firm, just Laurinda and myself, and we really design everything. We actually draw, I mean, everything. We show up with drawings in the office. Sometimes really dirty, but hard line, you know, and we actually design the buildings ourselves, and we have organized the office and all these people for only one purpose, is so that we can design, and they are organized to find time for us. Their job is to keep us away from things that we don't have to do so that we can spend time designing, and we have plenty of time to design that way. So we have complete control of every single project to the last detail. It's run as a studio. It's not a corporate office, you know. I mean, it's very loose.
Okay, yes, sir, on the aisle.
You talked before about an architect having quality of feeling for humanity, yet what one finds running through your style, not only the use of color, but also shape and geometry, a lot of Le Corbusier. Could you talk with us a little bit about perhaps any influence it might have had upon you? I mean, here's a man who designed a building in Marseille. The whole neighborhood looks like that building, or you have the feeling of that entire building wherever you go in that neighborhood. One gets the same thing if one goes on Brickell Avenue. Tell us a little more about that. And yet, one of the big criticisms of Le Corbusier was how inhuman the man was for all this fine sense of design and color.
Well, that is true. I mean, some of his work, however, is really great. I mean, most of it. I can never deny influence of people like Le Corbusier. Every architect has somewhere in his mind some of his ideas, I think, at least in our times. And but we don't see our work following that strictly some of the things he does. I mean, we don't, if anything, our work truly follows the original tenets of modernism, which was freedom, you know, and Le Corbusier set a lot of rules for himself, in my opinion, that were unnecessary. You know, separating the structure from the wall. You know, I mean, there's a lot of supposedly form follows function, but I have my questions about that. But it is our work, I think, has a greater sense of freedom of expression. I mean, it's a lot more expressionist, and it has really we really sit down to design with no preconceptions whatsoever. I mean,
Well, your work is not polemical, I think, might be one way to put it, whereas his work was.
Yes, we don't claim that. We design what we think is right. We don't philosophize about it. We don't write books about it. We want to get buildings built, and we enjoy seeing buildings built and seeing the designs become reality. And that's as much time as we have in our lives. We have. I do admire when I was at Harvard, and there were the last years, or some of the original modernists like Jerzy Soltan and Joseph Zaleski and Jose Luis Sert. And I will never forget how they spoke about architecture in such poetic terms. You know, there were great ideals in that whole generation. There were good intentions about architecture and what it can do for society, and I never forget those speeches that those people gave, because they were, in fact, less interested in style and whether something belonged in history or not. I mean, they were interested in what architecture could do for society and for low-income housing and for a better city. And maybe they were wrong in their solutions in sometimes, but there was great idealism. And I wish we could have in our practice that idealism. And part of our obsession with dealing with that, the common projects, comes from our interest in somehow being involved in buildings that impact the common man, you know, and that's what I think we owe most to that generation.
Yes.
Judging from the slides, it seems like a lot of the impact of the building is sort of on the surface and what you see from the road or from across the bay and so forth. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the interiors and what you're trying to get across inside.
Well, it is, I wish I could have showed you, because we've done a lot of interiors of these buildings as well. It is, but I showed some of these exteriors because some of what we saw in the opportunity of the high-rise is that the high-rise has a unique responsibility to the city, unlike a low-rise which impacts the street, and unlike a house which can be behind a wall or behind a very long lawn in a garden way back there. The high-rise has an obligation to the public that, frankly, has been generally ignored. There's a lot of very luxurious condominiums in Miami, all over Miami Beach, which may be incredibly spacious and fantastic layouts, and then the exterior is horrendous. It just doesn't care. As a matter of fact, all they do is they express. I mean, if there's a closet that they need to shove in there, it bumps out of the building. You know, I mean, it becomes a whole shaft in the facade, and there was no sense of concern about the image of a building as it affects the image of the city, and frankly, in New York, I think this is very true too. I mean, there are a lot of condominiums that are designed all over the place, including by prominent developers. You know, what is it called, Trump Plaza or whatever. You know, that are frankly. I'm sure that the layouts are fantastic, but I don't think the exterior does anything, contributes anything to the city, and that's why I was trying to emphasize the exterior. I think our layouts are very good, and in many cases they're very, very new, and they have very pleasant spaces, nicely proportioned. But I think that's understood. That's a given. Every building should be that, and I don't think I should be bragging too much about that, because that's understood that I'm doing that, and it's beyond that we're trying to do something that contributes to the general public perception of architecture.
You actually worked some years ago on one New York condominium with a developer and another architect. Is that not?
Yes, and I had a horrendous struggle here, frankly.
Right.
I mean, horrendous. I have to admit, it was one of the most difficult experiences of our career. We really tried very hard and tried to do something new, and it was. I think it is I hate to say this about New York, but I think there is a great misconception about New York being in the forefront of new design and experimentation, and I think this is the last place where things happen. Really, they happen in Dallas and Los Angeles and San Francisco and Atlanta, Chicago, Miami, everywhere, and I don't see much improvement here.
Well, I think there's
But
a
I
greater.
shouldn't say that.
No,
Wrong place
there's
to
a
say that.
greater dichotomy between the role of this city intellectually and culturally and the actuality of what its commercial sector produces. I mean, I think that's
I'd say
there's just a greater distance. I mean, in Dallas, there is not much advanced thinking going on, but
Yeah.
what gets built is pretty much
Granted,
up to what the level of what thinking there is. And in New York, in effect, you have thinking that may go beyond Dallas, but a development community that's so conservative that what it builds is below Dallas. So you have this.
Well, I don't know
great-
what is it, because no question. Yes, I mean, this is the cultural center of the world, and somehow architecture, it doesn't make it up there compared to everything else, theater and the arts in general and the museums and everything. And I sometimes think that real estate is so valuable
That's
here.
right. No, that
and
is
that they
the answer.
think they don't have to do anything to sell it. That it's taken for granted.
And unfortunately, it's been more or less true, or they would have changed their tune.
Yeah, well, I have to assume that. I don't live here, but that's the impression I get, that all they're looking is to be able to have some square footage to sell or rent, and that there isn't that kind of pride on the developer sector, that, except for, I'm sure there's some exceptions. I mean, I'm talking in too general terms, but that's the impression it gives. Boy, I wasn't planning to say that.
I'm glad you did. Yes, madam.
You design both private homes and for developers. Could you talk a little bit about what the difference is, other than cost, obviously?
Yeah, we do about 2 houses every year, and we do them because we enjoy doing houses. I think in designing private homes, you have the opportunity to get involved in a lot more detail that you otherwise would not be able to in a more commercial project. You have you don't have to live with generalizations about what the market will take or what people would want. I mean, people, it's an intangible. I mean, it's not measurable. But you have to cope with that problem and your client's opinion of what people will think. When you do a house, you have only 1 or 2 people to deal with whom, if you are able to communicate well, you can have a great project. And I think it is good to keep doing some of those smaller projects. I think it's very dangerous when an architect, all he's doing is big skyscrapers, and like you suddenly lose the whole sense of scale and aspect of our profession. And houses literally bring you down to the ground, and there you're dealing with the issues of the laundry and the kitchen, and I think it's healthy. And I like having a very varied profession. I would hate to be stuck just doing corporate office buildings or just hospitals or just something. It's everything feeds from that. We learn something from the houses that we apply to the high-rises, and we learn things from the high-rises that, believe it or not, may apply to the houses. I mean, everything, it all feeds each other. And it's just like I hate to be doing work only in one city. I mean, I really like how our practice has developed, because every new place stimulates the imagination. It gets you going, and there's a new geography, and suddenly there are hills, and there's big trees, and there's different kind of trees, and there's snow. I mean, and there's other things that make you think in new ways. And I think it's very important in order to stay alive and not stagnant, to have that variety. I think houses are a very important part of an architect's profession. It brings you down to how to deal with a family and a couple and individuals instead of just in general society.
Real people, as opposed to some amorphous idea.
To some marketing report, I mean,
Right. Good, thank you. Yes, sir. Did you ever come up with a design that couldn't be built?
Nobody would admit it, no? But yeah, it's well, 1 second, I want to clarify, everything can be built. it's just a matter how much it costs. It is just about anything can be built, and we have come up, particularly earlier in our practice, with proposals that were very difficult to bring in the budget. That's what it boils down. Buildable, yes, they were, and. But I mean, it's good to come up once in a while with something that cannot be built. I mean, it's part of the intellectual curiosity that an architect should have, and sometimes dare, and try, and explore whether it can or not. And you really can't find out till it really comes down to analyzing it after you have come up with the idea. And one should never discard the possibility of something not being able to be built. One should always explore.
Good. Next. Yes, sir.
What sort of design ideas did you approach for your building in Lima, and what difficulties did you face, cultural or governmental, in building outside the U.S.?
The question was the building in Lima, Peru. What difficulties did you face? What sort of design ideas were involved?
Well, as difficulties, let me begin. I mean, you can't import anything, so we had to create everything and design everything ourselves. I mean, we designed the office partitioning system, the movable partitions, the area rugs, the china, the wall coverings. Everything in that building is designed by our office, and it's a big building. It's 530,000 square feet. It is. What did we do in the design? It was an unusual site. It was right up against the Andes, and there was a sort of a mound in the middle of the site, which client was planning to raise. I mean, he said, "Oh, you're from Miami. We're going to give you a flat site, I mean, just blow it up with dynamite and move it out, and you wouldn't want that." And I said, "Wait." We went to see the site, and we stopped them, and we told them, "Let us think about it." It turned out to be that there were some really incredible rock formations, and we told them, we would just want you to clean up the rocks because we think it'll look really interesting. It turned out to be Inca ruins in the middle of the site. And these guys were about to dynamite this archaeological thing, monument. It was, thank God for our willingness to visit the site. We thought we had a choice. We could have done a high-rise, and we thought it was inappropriate. We thought in a place like that where you have to import all the parts and depend so much on elevators, and it would not be right, and that we should do a more horizontal building. So we did a 4-story building. Each floor is 120,000 square feet. So we thought it was, and we also thought it was important to give natural light, that people were accustomed to have windows in their offices, that they were not accustomed to the whole air-conditioned world of America. And therefore we created a thinner building that creates a court, so that shortens the distances. Otherwise it would have been a long thing forever, because you can connect all the way around. And we located the various departments close to each other on the same floor or on one floor away, and we connected it with open stairs in between. And we created a building that from the exterior facade of that court, like donut, which creates that central space which has the ruins in the middle. The exterior was done in more corporate and silic material. It's done in a 30-degree diagonal pattern of black marble and with white veins, local product, and it has the very simple blue striped windows, and then it has a series of pieces that start coming through the building that are floating in different places that break up the facade. Then the inside court suddenly, instead of being slick and corporate, it becomes very human. It's a place for the employees to go. There's a terrace for them having lunch, to have lunch in the middle, and there's a nice garden where they can slow down in the middle of the day. And that whole interior is clad in a pink slate, and also a natural product of the place. It's a beautiful slate, and it's in a random pattern, and we came up with a system of how to lift it in panels that were pre-made, and it looks all beautifully done. I mean, incredible craftsmanship. We took advantage of the local craftsmanship. That was our great opportunity to get a building that was beautifully finished with beautiful details that people were able to do so well, the kind of craftsmanship that no longer exists in the United States. And that is really the main concept. It is this monumental court. I mean, there is a tradition of courts over there, and this is one that is not. It's larger, is simpler. I mean, it's not ornate like the old courts. And the building is also elevated off the ground, so you can see through to underneath the building, up the mountain, and through the court. For security reasons, obviously, also, because you cannot have ground floor offices, for security.
Good, thank you. Great, any others? Have we, yes, in the front.
Could you talk a little bit about the way you collaborate with your wife in terms of designing?
Well, we have a...
Each periods of infertile imagination, once it's over and the other.
Oh, no, we have 4 children. We have no problem with that. We have no problem of fertility. It's a very, we're very lucky because really, I think it would be very difficult to have a practice of the size and variety of ours and be able to design everything ourselves. And if we were a one-partner office, it would be extremely difficult. And if we were a 10-partner office, you would lose the personal feeling that our architecture has, that it comes out of our inside, And but the fact that we're both architects and we started together, that first house that you saw is the first project we did together before we were married, and is a fantastic advantage because we really design the buildings at any point. Whenever we wish, when we feel we have an idea, we comment with the other. If you're alone, you always doubt yourself. You always wish you had somebody that you trusted their opinion to bounce the idea with, and that you'll get some feedback and reinforce that you're in the right direction, going in the right direction, or tell you you've been looking at this building too long. You're totally off, But you want somebody that you trust to tell you that, and sometimes you come with ideas on a weekend and over dinner and at a restaurant. How many times we have designed buildings on the paper placemat or the napkin, because sometimes your ideas come out of conversation and things we just saw driving down, and that affects one's thinking. And we have that advantage over other offices. Obviously, most people don't have a husband and wife team that can discuss it while driving the kids to school, and discuss a building. It's a fabulous, and it becomes incredibly efficient. We make, therefore, decisions much faster than the person that is stuck on his own self, trying to make a design decision.
Good. Any others? Yes, sir.
Fort-Brescia, you've said some very interesting things about context tonight. Without exaggerating the importance of that, you've said some things about context in downtown New York, where I work, and you've shown me some things I hadn't seen, and some contextual things about Southern California. I've seen your houses in Houston, and I wonder what you could tell me about the context of those houses that would enlighten me.
Sure.
Make their presence there more Houston-like.
Well, it's an interesting town that you've picked of all the places that we have worked, because there's some there's some cities with less architecture that have more personality. Houston is such a new town. I mean, I don't think it existed as a city 20 years ago. I mean, it was a big town, but I mean, as a city with a downtown with important buildings. And it was, and it was a place that I didn't see as having any particular history about architecture, except for the last 10 years, where suddenly Gerald Hines came in and built out the whole place with all these incredible buildings by Philip Johnson and everybody else, and IMP. But it's very, very recent history. It doesn't even have a history of a certain character like Miami had.
Right.
It didn't even have that. It was most of our work in Houston was unusual because it was residential work near downtown. In a period where the city was trying to densify and become more urban in the perimeter of downtown, there were intentionally trying to build out, intensify residential neighborhoods adjacent to downtown so people wouldn't commute so far away out to those suburbs. And our work, like behind the River Oaks Shopping Center, was an example where we fit in 10 townhouses where there were 2 houses, and suddenly created a very dense street life along that street. And but stylistically, the work was very modern and free, and as different as some of those buildings were doing in the downtown skyline. I didn't see any need to relate to the next door house because it was going to be torn down to build another bunch of townhouses. I mean, the whole neighborhood had no zoning, and if the
all
need
of
was
Houston
there,
has no zoning.
yeah, the whole of Houston had no zoning. So, what guarantee was there that the next door? I mean, I could have a 20-story building next door to some townhouses. Who knows? You know, it's totally unpredictable. And the fact that is that we could see the trend of demolition and that the place was being changed dramatically, and therefore that's the position that we took, that we had to create a new context.
Good. We have time, I think, for just 1 or 2 more. Yes, sir, in the back.
I think your work is probably the most responsive architecture in Miami that's been built in the last 10 years. And I'm wondering your thoughts on the future direction, because in the downtown corridor, they're showing up more and more buildings built by out-of-town architects who have no sense of what Miami is. And I'm wondering what you see some of the problems ahead for Miami architects.
Well, I think that it is true that in the downtown core, there have been a lot of, there's been sort of an invasion from Texas, so to speak. You know, I mean, when they ran out of work there, then they invaded Tampa, Miami, a lot of, Memphis, a lot of other cities in the South, and they're building these big glass boxes. And then now they're putting little strips of granite so that to make it supposedly more human or more corporate, or I don't know what, but they're still the same boxes. The Dallasizing of Tampa, that's what they call little Tampa. But Miami is starting to have some of that, yes. Lincoln Properties and Gerald Hines and everybody has gone and built one of these buildings in downtown, and is losing a lot of its character. It's starting to look like any other downtown, and it's a pity. I have to say, they're the same boring buildings with beige travertine in the facade, or or tasteful red granite on silver glass. Excuse me.
It's the way they block the bay, the way they don't respond to the environment at all, whereas yours always have. And it's a shame that people aren't responsive to what Miami has to offer.
Well, there is such a push for the development of downtown. There's all these, the city will cooperate in any way, to build a major building in downtown. And the blocking of the bay, if anything, I find it disturbing that the buildings don't come closer to the water. In fact, there's, I mean, I'm not against parks, but there's something nice about certain cities that they really almost touch the water, and that there isn't this huge gap. What the strange thing about walking in downtown Miami is that you never feel the bay, because the park is so big between the city and the bay that it becomes, instead of a link, an obstacle. It would be nice if it had a boardwalk right there and the water was right up against you, and that the park was instead in the middle of the city and not at the edge.
Yeah, I think it is possible, in fact, for a city to respond to water without banning buildings from close proximity. If we look at Battery Park City in New York, for example, the Esplanade, which is very successful, is very narrow, and the buildings come very close to the water, and yet it's, in fact, enormously open to the water in another sense. I think that's a very good point.
I think open space is more successful, like Central Park, giving life to the center of the city. You have open air once you're next to the water. Enough open air. I mean, it's nice to have some smaller.
But there must be accessibility to the waterfront. But accessibility need not mean vast amounts of open space.
Sure.
I think that's your point.
Exactly.
That's right. One more if we have time for. Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering, you mentioned some people that you admired in your college days. I just wondered, are there any architects whose work you find especially inspiring, or any particular buildings that you feel any affinity for?
Oh yes, I like a lot of other people's work. Yes, a lot.
Can you name a couple?
Oh yeah, I like.
It will not be held against you. Don't worry.
Okay. No, no, I'm not the kind of architect who hates everybody else's work. No, I mean, even if it doesn't look like what we do, I like it. You know, I mean, I like Norman Foster's work a lot. I think there's a really interesting work. I think there's some very interesting work happening in France, like the Center for the Arab World.
Jean Nouvel.
Yes, yeah. Really great, very, very interesting work. I think a lot of the work that Frank Gehry is doing is very good, and that Amorphosis does is pretty good too. I mean, I can have even a longer list for you, but those are some of the people that I like. I think some of Ram Koolhaas's new work, like the Ballet Theater in Amsterdam. That's a very low-budget building, and it's...
Your work has always had some affinity with Koolhaas's work, I think.
Yes, we're good friends, right. And we like each other's work, yes.
Right. Good, great.
So,
Bernardo, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.